In the darkness of a secluded village, far removed from the world, where no one dared to set foot after nightfall, a mysterious cult had quietly existed for many years. This cult had no name, only a chilling moniker that struck fear into anyone who spoke of it: the Smile Cult. Its followers, whether men or women, all bore an eerie smile upon their faces, one that seemed less like a symbol of joy and more like a sign of torment. They never stopped smiling, not because of happiness, but because of an unnatural compulsion, a curse that bound them. According to the cult's leader, if they stopped smiling for even a moment, a nightmare beyond imagination would ensue, and the person would vanish, erased from existence. They would leave no trace, no memory, as if they had never existed. The followers of this cult were once lost souls, those searching for meaning in a world full of darkness. A man, a woman, a family, all were lured into the cult with promises of peace and freedom from worldly suffering. But those promises were nothing more than a facade, a mask hiding a cruel reality. When someone first joined, they were led into a dimly lit room, where the faint light of a few candles cast long shadows on the walls, amplifying the eeriness of the atmosphere. A soft laugh echoed from one corner of the room, only to be soon followed by a chorus of other laughs, an unending echo, a sound that seemed to come from the very depths of the darkness itself. The cult leader, a middle-aged man with cold eyes and a perpetual smile on his face, stepped into the center of the room. His gaze remained unchanging, but the flickering candlelight made his face appear grotesque, almost unreal. "Smile, and you will be free," he said in a deep, hypnotic voice that seemed to draw everyone in. But none of them knew that behind that smile lay a curse, one that would never release them, one that would lead them down an irreversible path. The new initiates began to feel strange changes within their bodies. They experienced sharp, unexplained pains, a sense of suffocation, and an exhausting weariness from having to keep their smiles intact for hours, even days. And then, there were those who could no longer bear it. They stopped smiling, even for a brief moment, and that was when they disappeared. A girl who had just joined, named Maria, was one of the first to experience this fate. She began to feel an overwhelming heaviness in her body, her hands trembling, her legs unable to support her anymore. In a moment of utter despair, she sighed, and just as quickly as the sigh escaped her lips, the room fell silent. Her eyes widened in terror as she looked around, and suddenly a faint whoosh echoed through the room. A blinding light flashed, and she vanished, just like that, without a trace. No one dared to speak. Those left behind could only smile, but their smiles were no longer genuine. They were smiles of fear, of hopelessness, because they knew that even momentary lapse in their forced joy would lead to the same fate. The cult continued to grow, and with it the number of those who vanished without a word. The remaining followers began to exchange nervous glances, wondering if they would be the next to succumb to the curse. When Maria disappeared, no one said a word. The cult leader simply stood there, smiling, but behind that smile was something far darker, something that awaited them all, and no one knew when it would come for them next. The cult's curse had bound them to one eternal truth: they must smile forever. The village had become a place of eerie stillness, as if time itself had come to a halt. As nightfall descended, the houses remained shrouded in darkness, their only source of light being the faint glow from the dimly lit oil lamps scattered around. But inside these homes, the same unsettling sound echoed: laughter, ceaseless and unbroken. It wasn't laughter of joy, but of torment. It was the laughter of souls trapped in a never-ending cycle, bound to an insufferable fate. Every night these laughs reverberated, breaking the silence, creeping into the minds of the remaining followers who could do nothing but join in. They were no longer in control of their smiles. The smile was now their prison. The ones who remained were the survivors, the ones who had somehow managed to keep up with the ritual. But now, their smiles were not just physical, they were forced upon them, etched into their faces like a permanent scar. Each night, the pain of holding the smile grew. Their jaws ached, their lips cracked and bled, but they could not stop. The curse would not allow it. In one of the houses hidden deep within the forest, Maria, the girl who had vanished before, suddenly reappeared. But this was not the Maria they once knew. Her face was frozen in an unnatural smile, and her eyes, once full of life, were now hollow, void of emotion, as if her soul had been sucked out by the very curse she had once embraced. Her skin was pale and her movements stiff. She was no longer human. She did not speak. She only stood there, her mouth stretched in a grotesque grin, watching the others with lifeless eyes. The remaining followers looked at her in shock, their faces pale with fear. They didn't know whether to run, to scream, or to continue the act. She was a warning, a chilling reminder of what awaited them if they failed to keep up the charade. As the night deepened, the leader of the cult, the one who held them all in his iron grip, emerged from the shadows. His smile never wavered, a smile as cold and inhuman. Maria, who remained unmoving in the corner, her smile fixed, her eyes distant. His words hung in the air like a death sentence. A chilling silence enveloped the room, and every follower felt the weight of his gaze. They all understood the consequences of defying him, and despite the unbearable pain, they all knew they had no choice but to continue. But as the night wore on, cracks began to show in their facade. One by one, the followers started to lose their grip. A man, his face contorted in agony, couldn't bear it anymore. His mouth trembled as he tried to force the smile to remain, but his lips quivered, and he felt the heavy burden of exhaustion taking over. I can't do this," he whispered, barely audible. The room fell silent, and in that instant, the air grew cold. A gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging them into darkness. The man's body trembled, his eyes wide with terror. The next moment, a blinding flash of light erupted, and he was gone, without a trace. The room was once again filled with the haunting, empty sound of forced laughter. No one moved. No one dared to speak. The realization hit them all like a brick wall. They were prisoners to this endless cycle, and there was no escape. The cult leader stepped forward, his smile widening ever so slightly. "Do you see now?" he asked, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "The price of weakness is high. But fear not, my children. You will all laugh together forever, until the end of time." And so, the cult continued, its followers bound to the endless torment of their smiles. Every night, the laughter grew louder, until it became the only sound left in the world, an eternal reminder of their captivity. They were trapped in a nightmare with no end in sight, doomed to smile forever, never to stop. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The village had transformed into a silent, forsaken place, where no joy remained, only the hollow echoes of tortured laughter. Every corner, every shadow, was filled with the sound of smiles that never ceased. The followers of the smile cult had become mere shells of the people they once were. Their eyes were empty, their souls long gone, consumed by the relentless force of the curse. They had been reduced to nothing more than puppets, their smiles carved into their faces, frozen and unmoving. But there was still a flicker of hope within a few of them. a small, fragile spark that refused to be completely extinguished. Deep inside, some of the followers began to question. They wondered what lay beyond the endless laughter. They whispered to each other, though their voices trembled with fear, asking if there was a way out, some escape. Semblance of her former self. Eleanor had felt the curse's grip tighten on her day by day. Yet, she could still remember what it was like to live without the need to smile constantly. It was one night, as the moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the village, that Eleanor made up her mind. She could no longer live like this. The pain in her jaw had become unbearable, the weight of the forced smile pressing down on her like an unshakable burden. She had seen enough of her fellow villagers vanish, disappear without a trace, consumed by the curse for the smallest mistake. She couldn't let herself be next. In the dead of night, when the others were lost in their endless smiles, Eleanor crept out of her small dimly lit room and into the darkness. She moved with trembling hands and a heart racing with both terror and hope. She had heard whispers of a hidden place in the village, a place untouched by the curse, a sanctuary where the grip of the smile cult could not reach. But the moment she crossed the threshold of the village's outer limits, an overwhelming sense of dread filled the air. She could hear it, the faint low chuckles that seemed to come from all directions. It wasn't just the followers of the cult anymore. It was something darker, something older and far more sinister. The wind howled, carrying with it the sound of 1,000 souls trapped in eternal laughter. Suddenly, Eleanor felt a cold hand on her shoulder, and a voice, soft, mocking, whispered in her ear, "You cannot escape, child. There is no freedom for you here." She spun around, her heart stopping in her chest. Standing behind her was Maria, her face frozen in that haunting grin, her eyes lifeless. Eleanor gasped, but Maria did not move, only continued to smile, her vacant eyes staring through her. "You thought you could leave." Maria's voice was not her own, but a hollow echo of something far darker. "We are all bound to the curse. You cannot outrun it. You cannot break free." Eleanor stumbled backward, a cold sweat dripping down her spine. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She had to get away. She had to escape. But as she turned to flee, the laughter grew louder, more oppressive. It surrounded her, filled her ears, and before she knew it, her body froze. The smile, the damnable forced smile, began to stretch across her face, against her will. Her mouth curved upward, but the joy was gone. Only fear, only despair remained. The curse had found her. As the last vestiges of her resistance shattered, Eleanor's mind screamed in agony. She tried to fight, tried to make her face return to its natural expression, but the smile was too powerful, too unyielding. Her entire body trembled with the effort. The smile cult. She had become one of the endless laughs that echoed through the village, forever trapped in the nightmare she had tried to escape. In the distance, the cult leader watched from the shadows. His smile never faltered. He had seen it all unfold before him, and with each new soul claimed, his power grew stronger. His followers were his puppets, and they would continue to laugh forever until the end of time. And so, the cycle continued. The village remained a ghost town, the endless laughter of the smile cult echoing through the woods, a chilling reminder of the curse that bound them all. There was no escape. There was no salvation. The only thing left was the smile, and with it, the endless suffering that would never end. The cursed village stood as a monument to despair, where every soul was forced to smile, and every soul would eventually disappear, lost to the void, never to be remembered. The days blended into one another, and the village grew more desolate with each passing night. The once vibrant community had become nothing more than a hollow shell, a place where joy and life had long since vanished. The only thing left was the sound of laughter, ever present, unrelenting, and filled with the hollow echo of torment. The few remaining followers of the Smile cult were no longer recognizable as the people they once were. Their eyes were dull, their faces frozen in permanent, unnatural grins. They had long since lost the ability to feel anything, any emotions, any thoughts beyond the compulsion to smile. They were living dead, walking through the village like mindless automata, cursed to repeat the same ritual day after day. But something was changing. Rumors began to circulate among the followers, whispers of a strange phenomenon, a dark presence that had begun to seep into the very fabric of the village. The cult leader, once a figure of absolute power and control, had begun to act strangely. His smile, though still present, had become more twisted, more unnatural. His eyes, once cold and calculating, now glowed with an eerie intensity, as if something ancient and malevolent had taken root within him. One night, a cold wind swept through the village, chilling the bones of those still trapped in their endless smiles. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the sky above had turned a deep, ominous black. The villagers, forced into their perpetual laughter, gathered in the square, their faces contorted with the strain of holding their smiles in place. They didn't know why they were gathered, only that the cult leader had commanded it. As they assembled, the ground beneath them began to tremble. A low, rumbling growl echoed through the earth, as if the village itself were alive and angry. The followers looked at one another in confusion, the light of the flickering lanterns. His smile was wide, his eyes burning with a fierce, unnatural light. The laughter of the cultists grew louder, faster, as if it were becoming something uncontrollable. "Tonight," the leader's voice boomed, filled with dark power, "you will all witness the true end of this curse. Tonight, we embrace the full power of the Smile cult. You will all laugh until there is nothing left of you. No soul, no memory, only the smile." The villagers, despite their fear, continued to smile. They had no choice. It was not just the curse that bound them anymore. It was the cult leader's words, his promises of ultimate release from the torment they had endured. But they did not realize the true horror of what he meant. As the leader spoke, the ground cracked open before them, and from the depths of the earth something ancient and terrifying emerged. It was not a person, but a presence, a force of darkness that seemed to feed on fear, on suffering. It was as if the village itself had opened a door to the void, inviting something far more sinister than the curse they had already been living with. The cult leader, now consumed by this dark entity, stepped forward and extended his arms. The entity surrounded him, its shadow casting a chilling pallor over the square. The leader's smile grew wider, more grotesque, as he embraced the power that flowed through him. "You see," he laughed maniacally, his voice warped, "this is what I have been preparing for. This is the true smile. The smile that will consume all of you. There will be nothing left but the laughter." Suddenly, the entity's power surged, and a wave of darkness spread across the square, engulfing everyone in its path. The followers continued to laugh, but their laughter began to sound more like a scream that could never escape, a scream trapped in the prison of their cursed smiles. As the darkness consumed them, one by one, the followers began to fade, their bodies disintegrating into nothingness. Their smiles remained, but their bodies were gone, erased from existence. The village, too, began to crumble under the weight of the curse, the houses collapsing into the earth, the very foundations of their world unraveling. And yet, the laughter persisted. It echoed through the ruins, through the empty streets, as if the curse had taken on a life of its own. The last of the followers, their faces twisted in agony, continued to laugh, even as they vanished into the void, leaving behind only the faintest trace of their existence. The village laughter persisted. It echoed through the empty spaces where the houses once stood, haunting the very air. Even as the winds swept over the ruins, there was no peace, no silence. The laughter, hollow and endless, hung in the air like an unshakable fog. For years, the world outside remained unaware of the village's fate. Life continued in nearby towns, oblivious to the dark history lurking just beyond their reach. But the curse was far from over. The power of the smile cult had not died with its followers. It had only transformed. The leader's smile, now an unholy relic of what was once a man, endured. His body, no longer flesh, no longer human, had become a part of the darkness that had emerged from the depths of the earth. His smile was now more than a symbol of torment. It was the embodiment of the curse itself, a constant reminder that some evil never truly dies. It only waits. And so the smile spread. It moved like a creeping shadow, slipping unnoticed into the hearts of the unwary. It began with a whisper, a suggestion, a smile here, a laugh there, subtle at first, but slowly, insidiously, it grew. One by one, those who came into contact with the cursed land found themselves compelled by an uncontrollable urge to smile. It started as a simple twist of the lips, a fleeting expression, but then it became something more. The longer they held it, the stronger the compulsion grew. Their jaws would ache, their faces would crack with a strain, yet they would smile, unable to stop, unable to break free. And then, just like those before them, they would disappear, their existence wiped from the world as though they had never been. It wasn't long before whispers began to spread about the smile cult, about the cursed village that had vanished, leaving only the laughter behind. People spoke of a place where the smile was not just a gesture, but a death sentence. A place where joy was twisted into something unrecognizable. Those who dared to investigate never returned. They were claimed by the curse, their faces frozen in smiles as they too were consumed. The village, now a ghost in the land, had become a myth, a tale told in hushed voices, a warning to those who dared to tread too far. But like all myths, its power only grew, feeding on the fear and curiosity of the living. People traveled to the ruins, driven by morbid fascination, unaware that they were walking into a trap from which they would never escape.
Part. No one could stop it, for it had already spread, insidiously taking root in the hearts of the people, one smile at a time. There was no cure, no salvation. Once you smiled, once you gave in to the laugh that began to consume you, you were lost. Your soul would slip away, your existence forgotten, and all that would remain was the smile, frozen, eternal. The legend of the smile cult was no longer just a story. It was a warning, and in the end, it wasn't just about a village or a cult. It was about a curse that could not be broken. A curse that would haunt the world forever. A world where the smile was no longer a sign of happiness, but a mark of doom. The eternal smile. It would never stop. Years passed, and the world beyond the cursed village moved forward, its people oblivious to the growing presence of something malevolent, creeping in the shadows. The smile cult, though buried in the ruins of the vanished village, had never truly gone. Its influence had woven itself into the fabric of the world, spreading silently through the cracks of reality, affecting those who dared to venture too close, who dared to challenge the forgotten myth. And then, the first disappearance occurred. In a quiet town on the outskirts of the cursed land, a young woman named Clara, drawn by the strange allure of the stories and whispers, traveled to investigate the ruins. She had heard the rumors, of course, but like so many before her, she believed it to be nothing more than an urban legend, a tale spun to frighten children. Clara had no fear, or so she thought. She approached the remnants of the village one evening, the sun casting a faint glow over the twisted remnants of crumbled stone and broken wood. The air felt heavier here, thicker, as if the village was holding its breath, waiting. But Clara didn't feel fear. Instead, she felt a strange pull, an overwhelming curiosity. When she stepped into the village, her footsteps were the only sound. The silence felt unnatural, like the land itself was watching, waiting for her to make the first mistake. It was then that she saw it, just a glimmer at the corner of her eye, a figure standing motionless in the distance. Clara's heart raced, but she moved toward it, drawn like a moth to the flame. As she approached, the figure came into focus. A man, tall and unnaturally still, his face hidden in shadow. And then she saw it, a smile. Not a genuine smile, not a friendly gesture, but a stretched, grotesque grin that seemed to warp the very air around him. For a moment, Clara froze, her breath catching in her throat. But then she laughed, nervously, awkwardly, as if she was breaking the tension. Before she could react, the figure, stepped forward. The world seemed to distort around him, the ground trembling beneath her feet. And then, just like that, Clara felt her body lock into place. The smile, now uncontrollable, stretched across her face. "No, no, no," she whispered. But it was useless. Her body was no longer her own. The smile would not stop. The figure's grin widened impossibly. "You are mine now," it said, in a voice that wasn't quite human. Clara's vision blurred as the dark force overwhelmed her, and she too was claimed by the curse. Her body disintegrated into the air, leaving behind only the smiling face frozen in time. No one would ever know what had happened to Clara. She had simply vanished, a part of the dark legend, now one of the many faces who smiled their way into oblivion. And like her, many more would come after. The curse of the smile cult had spread, its victims unknowingly drawn into its grasp. But it wasn't just the living who were at risk. There were reports of strange happenings in nearby towns. People would wake up to find themselves smiling in their sleep, and the urge grew stronger the longer they resisted. It was a mental invasion, insidious and terrifying. The cult's influence had spread like an infection, seeping into the dreams of the living. There were whispers of the figure in the shadows, always lurking, always waiting to claim the next soul. It was no longer confined to the village, and it wasn't just about the smile anymore. It was about control, about breaking the will of those who encountered it. The legend of the smile cult, once thought to be a dark myth, was now a reality. It was the smiling shadow that would follow you home, creeping into your dreams, your thoughts, your very soul. And once you smiled, you could never stop. Somewhere, in the darkest corners of the world, the figure in the shadows waited, and the smile would never fade. It would haunt you forever.